Today I would be delivering a lecture on Samuel Taylor Coleridge's Kubla Khan, that is also subtitled A Vision in a Dream, a Fragment. I would be discussing on the topic Form and Structure of Samuel Taylor Coleridge's Kubla Khan. This lecture, to be hosted online, is meant for the students of BA English Honours Program of the 4th semester for paper CC 8. The structure of Samuel Taylor Coleridge's Kubla Khan, published in 1816, is not only unique but also highly contrived. The probable dates of composition are the fall or summer of the year 1957 and October 1799. The poet revised the poem before its publication in 1816. As you know, Kublai Khan from 1215 to 1294 was the fifth Mongol great Khans and the founder of the Yuan dynasty in China, ruled from roughly 1279 to 1368. Kubla Khan is best known to the West as Kublai Khan of Marco Polo. Kublai founded what was intended to be his brother's new capital, but became in effect his own summer residence, the town of Kaiping. It later was named Shangtu, or Upper Capital, and was immortalized as Xanadu of Coleridge's poem. Coleridge's poem was inspired by travel literature. In Purchas's Pilgrimage, a Jacobean travelogue published in 1613, Purchas reports, I quote, "In Xanadu did Kubla Khan build a stately palace encompassing 16 miles of plain ground, a sumptuous house of pleasure." And Coleridge was reading this Purchas's Pilgrimage before planning to write his famous poem Kubla Khan. The structure of Kubla Khan, as you can see in this box, can be divided into three compartments. Box A refers to the preface of 1816, how the poem was written. First, it talks about the origin. It was the summer of the year 1797. Coleridge had retired to a lonely farmhouse between Porlock and Linton. He took an anodyne, that means opium, was reading the following sentence in Purchas's Pilgrimage. I quote, "Here the Khan Kubla commanded a palace to be built and a stately garden." So he fell asleep in his chair, was 3 hours in profound sleep. On awakening, had a distinct recollection of the whole, taking his pen and ink and paper instantly and eagerly wrote down the lines that are then preserved in the poem Kubla Khan. The second box refers to the dissolution of the entire narrative of Purchas, because he was unfortunately called out by a person on business from Porlock. On his return to his room, he found, to the general purport of his vision, had passed away. The third box talks about the recreation, a poem within the preface, and in this recreation he is writing, I quote Coleridge's own written preface, "Then all the charm is broken, all that phantom world so fair vanishes, and now once more the pool becomes a mirror." Come to the second box, the box that we call box B. In this poem we have a 54-line poem that is called a fragment, a vision, a dream vision. George Watson says that it is a poem about poetry, while Humphrey House says that it is a poem about poetic process, a poem not just about poetry. It is about two kinds of poem, according to Watson. This part B, the poem itself, a poem of 54 lines, has two parts, lines 1 to 36, the narrative describing the decree, the artifice, and the natural world. While from line number 37 onwards to line number 54, there is a spontaneous overflow of powerful feeling from emotion that is recollected in tranquility from the vision of the first part, line number 1 to 36. And here we have the lyrical outburst, starting with a damsel with a dulcimer in a vision once I saw. Box number C refers to the endnote of true manuscript in Coleridge's own handwriting that refers to the poem as number 1, this fragment, number 2, as composed in a sort of reverie, and number 3, brought on by 2 grains of opium. So this endnote to Crewe's manuscript refers to the poem as a fragmentary one that is composed in a sort of reverie and is also a product of opium tainted dream. In the structure of the poem, let us come to the main poem, lines 1 to 54. We can subdivide the first section, line number 1 to 36, into 3 sections. In section 1, the poet talks about the paradise decreed. It starts with, in Xanadu did Kubla Khan write a decree to build a palace. So line number 1 to 5 gives an introduction to the ruler, the place and the decree, while lines 6 to 11 talks about the fulfillment of the decree, how the natural landscape was transformed into the pleasure garden. In the second section of the first part of the poem, the demonic reasserts itself. Line number 12 to 16 talks about the mysterious woman wailing for her demon lover. Line number 17 to 24, there is an eruption, while line number 25 to 28, a flow of lava, and there is a suggestion that there is a paradise that is gradually lost. And line number 29 to 30 talks about the prophecies of war, ancestral voices prophesying war. Section 3, line number 31 to 36, talks about the images of waning paradise and goes for an evaluation of the dream. In the second part of the poem, that is the lyrical portion, the spontaneous outburst of powerful feeling, there is a vision of the paradise regained. Line number 37 to 43 talks about a heavenly maid with a dulcimer. Section 5 talks about the lingering impression from line number 42 to 43, and section 6 talks about the visionary concept of a true paradise in a vision that the poet is promising to make from line number 44 to line number 54. Thus we have a poem of 54 lines, first divided into 2 parts and then divided into 6 parts. Section 1, the Paradise Decreed. Let us go through the poem for a better understanding of what Coleridge has intended through this poem. Line number 1 to 5 gives an introduction to the ruler, the place and the decree. I read the lines of the poem. In Xanadu did Kubla Khan a stately pleasure dome decree, where Alp the sacred river ran through caverns measureless to man, down to a sunless sea. This is the description of the decree, the appointed place near the river Alp, and the conversion of the landscape into the pleasure garden. In the next portion, lines number 6 to 11, there is a fulfillment of the decree. So the plot of land for the building of this pleasure garden was selected. So twice 5 miles of fertile ground with walls and towers were girdled round, and there were gardens bright with singers' rills, where blossomed many an incense-bearing trees, and here were forests ancient as the hills, enfolding sunny spots of greenery. As we remember, Coleridge's intention was to prepare the readers with their willing suspension of disbelief that constitutes a poetic faith. The creation of the supernatural world in natural terms and the representation of the natural world in supernatural terms. The antiquity of the landscape, the natural wilderness of the land, is presented as a natural world, while the natural world of Kubla Khan, the conversion of landscape into the artifice, is presented in supernatural terms. In section 2, the demonic reasserts itself. Line number 12 to 16 talks about this mystery, a woman wailing for her demon lover. The lines goes on like this. But oh, that deep romantic chasm which slanted down the green hill, outward a cedarn cover, a savage place as holy and enchanted, as ever beneath the waning moon was haunted by woman wailing for her demon lover. So now we are transported into the world of the supernatural with the presence of this woman wailing for her demon lover. The natural and the supernatural converge together, mingle, and through this juxtaposition of binary opposites, Coleridge represents his own unique world of mingled charm. Line number 17 to 24 talks about an eruption, and from this schism with ceaseless turmoil seething, as if this earth in fast thick pants were breathing, a mighty fountain momently was forced, amid whose swift half intermittent bursts huge fragments vaulted like rebounding hail or chaffy grain beneath the thresher's flail. And amid these dancing rocks, at once and ever, it flung up momently the sacred river. Line number 25 to 28 talks about the flow of lava and gradually converges into the image, the vision of the paradise lost. 5 miles meandering with a mazy motion, through woods and dale the sacred river ran, then reached the caverns measureless to man, and sank in tumult to a lifeless ocean. Suddenly there is the prophecy of war coming in line number 29 and line number 30. And amid this tumult, Kubla heard from afar ancestral voices prophesying war. The sound of war come from the caverns measureless to man, and the tumultuous lifeless ocean. The river that sinks into it produces the sound of war, war, war. So we have section 3. There is the consideration of the images of a waning paradise, evaluations, line number 31 to 36. So this evaluation of the dome of pleasure that falls on the water of the stream. So Coleridge writes, the shadow of the dome of pleasure floated midway on the waves, where was heard the mingled measure from the fountain and the caves. It was a miracle of rare device, a sunny pleasure dome with caves of ice. What was the poem really about? Was it about the sunny pleasure dome and cave of ice, or was it about the reconciliation of opposite images juxtaposed by the poet? In the fourth section of the poem, there is a lyrical outburst, the vision of the paradise regained. We have the image of a heavenly maid playing on a dulcimer. So Coleridge suddenly breaks the narrative, and there is a spontaneous lyricism in these lines. A damsel with a dulcimer in a vision once I saw. It was an Abyssinian maid, and on her dulcimer she played, singing of Mount Tabora. Could I revive within me her symphony and her song? So the poet is transported into the realm of the supernatural and is talking about the vision of this damsel playing on her dulcimer. The musical notes of the harmonious music played on the dulcimer captures the vision in the best auditory form. So we have section 5, the lingering impression, line number 42 and 43 of the poem, that the poet is transported into the world of the ecstatic charm of the woman playing on the dulcimer. To such a deep delight it would win me. And the poet promises that with music lauded long, I will build the domineer. And this domineer is a figment of poetic imagination, produced after long contemplation and spontaneous outburst through the visionary experience. So we have the visionary concept of the true paradise coming in the concluding section of the poem, line number 44 to 54. So the poet talks about this visionary concept of a fabled paradise. I would build that dome in air, that sunny dome whose caves of ice, and all who heard should see them there, and all should cry, beware, beware, his flashing eyes, his floating hair, weave a circle round him thrice, and close your eyes with holy dread, for he on honey dew hath fed and drunk the milk of paradise. So we are now in a position to assess the poem as a poem that is concerned with the poetic process itself. Kubla Khan has been called a poem about poetry. It has also been called as a poem that is concerned with language and sound of poetry. The dream of Xanadu itself is an inspired vision, and the poet's purpose is to capture such visions in words. In attempting to do so, he encounters two serious difficulties. First, the language, the question of language. You remember that Wordsworth said that there is no basic difference between the language of poetry and the language of prose. When prose is well written, it becomes almost poetic. Coleridge opposed Wordsworth's view and said that there is an essential difference between the language of poetry and the language of prose because poetry is metrically composed. So the first problem that Coleridge encounters is the question of language. Language is an inadequate medium that permits only an approximation of the visions. It is used to record the visionary experience, but between the thought and the word, there is, of course, the slip. The second is the visions themselves. By the time the poet comes to set them down, the visions get faded into the light of common day and must be reconstructed from memory. Wordsworth talks about this reconciliation between the spontaneous overflow of powerful feeling and the feeling that takes its origin from emotion recollected in tranquility. Coleridge also talks about the symplastic power of poetry. The secondary imagination of the poet allows the poet to dissolve, diffuse, and dissipate in order to recreate. So this recreation of the iron memorial past in poetry with the help of artificial language makes poetry more difficult. Between the conception and the execution falls a shadow. As Eliot has said, the vision of Kubla's Xanadu is replaced by that of a damsel singing on Mount Abora. This is an unusual experience that is more auditory than visual and therefore less susceptible to description by mere words. So we have an internal structure, the internal structure of Kubla Khan. The internal structure of Kubla Khan is, of course, a very complex one. It is contrived, highly structured, artificial, and is a product of careful craftsmanship. Apparently, it looks like a spontaneous, fragmentary, opium-drenched poem, but there is a contrastive complex images that are juxtaposed in this poem. For example, the pleasant side of the earthly paradise that represents the beauty, safety, the wall and towers of line number 6 to 11 is juxtaposed to the demonic side that gives the features of landscape, the atmosphere, and relevant words are used in order to set this juxtaposition of binary opposites. So we have a contrasting view between the images of lines 6 to 11 and lines 12 to 16. There is, of course, a foreground irregularity in this poem to attract the attention of the readers. And this irregularity is done on two levels. First, on the level of repetition, second, on the level of deviation. So we have in line number 1 to 36, series of repetitions, especially elements of landscape recur at various points, creating some unity of space. In line number 37 to 54, the first person speaker, imagining his paradise with the use of pronouns I, me, and represents the godlike figure as him or his or he in line number 50, 51, 53. There is a repeated emotional appeal that is heard in lines 29, 33 and 48, and we have the intermingling of past tense and the present tense in the words like saw and see. The repetition of dulcimer helps to imagine a continuum of musical accompaniment forming a background, and through this conscious repetition of images and symbols, of sounds and words, Coleridge represents the unique world of Kubla Khan. The metrical structure of the poem is again a matter of much critical debate. Although Coleridge has simply reshaped the prosaic lines of Purchas's pilgrimage into metrical verse, in line number 1 to 11 we have the conversion of that into iambic tetrameter, and that is contrasted with iambic pentameter in the subsequent lines number 8 to 11. So there is again the juxtaposition of two types of metrical structures: iambic tetrameter of line number 1 to 11 with trochaic variations, and iambic pentameter in the subsequent lines number 8 to 11. Line number 12 to line number 30, we have the use of iambic pentameter with the exception of line number 13, a variation of five-footed pattern to masculine endings with 5 standard iambs in lines number 19 to 22. Again the use of pentameter in lines number 23 and 24, and in lines 25 to 30 there is an alternate between the feminine and the masculine endings. Line number 31 to 36, we have the use of tetrameter with 7 to 8 syllables, while the speaker's evaluation of the miracle is given within a pentametrical pattern in lines number 35 to 36. Line number 37 to 43, we have most of the lines only having 3 feet, and from line number 44 to 54, the last part of the poem, we have 9 syllabic lines that maintain a tetrametrical pattern throughout. Thus this metrical structure is highly contrived, innovative, and is not fragmentary, is not just a product of a reverie, opium dream, but a conscious task of poetry. And through this craftsmanship in the metrical structure, Coleridge has once again proved that there is an essential difference between poetry and prose, because poetry is metrically composed. Now let us deal with the syntactical structure of the poem. Lines 1 to 36, the narrative of the poem, beginning within Xanadu did Kubla Khan a stately pleasure dome decree. There is the pattern of long sentence, and the narrative prose structure is maintained throughout. And from this schism with ceaseless turmoil seething, as if this earth in fast thick pants were breathing, a mighty fountain momently was forced. So in this complex compounding of sentences, long sentence patterns, we have a unique narrative descriptive sketch used by Coleridge. In the second portion of the poem, lines number 36 to 54, the lyrical verse, the sentence patterns with regular pauses, and the sentence structures are short, trite, and very effective in foregrounding the emotional structure, the structure of emotion. A damsel with a dulcimer in a vision once I saw. There is a pause after that. It was an Abyssinian maid, and on her dulcimer she played, singing of Mount Abora. So the lines are short, and yet the phrases are set in such a way that we have a structured pattern of effective and spontaneous lyricism. The sound structure and the rhyme scheme of Coleridge's Kubla Khan is another aspect related to the form and structure of the poem. There is a unity and harmony within the subsections of the text, and these are created by the repetition of sound. Repetition of single sounds such as alliteration, consonance, and assonance produces an effective auditory impression on the mind of the listeners. Group of sounds, words, groups of words, anaphoras, end rhymes, all these are subsequently used in lines number 1 to 11, the first stanza. For example, the following sounds dominate in the first section of the poem. Sounds like ka, u, e, da. There is a lack of degree of phonetic harmony in the subsequent section of the poem, which corresponds with the feeling of unease evoked at this point in lines 12 to 15. There is an experiment even with the rhyme scheme of the poem. So if we trace the rhyme scheme pattern of the poem, we have lines 1 to 5 written in A, B, A, B. Line number 6 to 11 written in C, C, D, B, D, B. So the description surrounding walls, etc., garden. Section B seems to connect both subsections. In the second section of the poem, lines 12 to 16, there's a spot of mystery, and this mystery is generated by another rhyme scheme, almost patterned like the first section of the poem, A, B, A, B. Line number 17 to 24 again uses the same pattern, C, C, D, D, E, F, F. The eruption, the couplet, each focus on a distinguishable aspect of the poem. Line number 25 to 30 is patterned in the following rhyme scheme: G, H, H, G, J, J. In the third section, the rhyme scheme, if we just dislocate this section from other part, we have A, B, A, B, C, C. In the fourth section, line number 37 to 41, we have A, B, C, C, B, the heavenly maid with a dulcimer. In the next section, section number 5, we have line number 42 to 45, arranged as DE, DE. That gives a lingering impression and desired emotional state as preconditions of the final vision. Instead of the rhyme pattern, enjambment, that means the run-on lines, link verse lines to the last 9 lines of the poem. So we have the sixth section of the poem, lines 46 to 54, arranged in a rhyme scheme: F, G, F, 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 G, H, H, G. That gives the speaker's initiative, the reaction of the readers, listeners, and the final instruction given by the speaker, including his observation. And finally, the rhyme scheme that is used at the end of the poem. So we have in Kubla Khan an atmosphere that is essentially the part of the structure, an atmosphere of mystery that is presented in section 1, line number 1 to 5. This mysterious atmosphere is created through a recourse into historical narrative. Then there is the atmosphere of peaceful, pleasant atmosphere in lines number 6 to 11. In the second section, line number 12 to 16, there is this again the use of the mysterious and the sinister. Lines 17 to 28, there is an agitation in the world of nature. In third section, line number 31 to 36, this agitation is exaggerated. In section 4, line number 37 to 48, there is a dreamlike quality, a peaceful delight. In line number 49 to 50, there is an awe-inspiring, fearsome image. And in the concluding section, lines 51 to 54, awe-inspiring and pleasant atmosphere is created by the poet. Therefore, the atmosphere is also a blending of the natural and the supernatural, covering the extremities of human passion and touching upon an atmosphere of awe, mystery, wonder, sensationalism, and charm that produces aesthetic delight that the readers can easily relish. Seen from the point of view, the narratorial point of view, Kubla Khan can also be seen as a highly structured poem rather than a fragmentary, visionary poem. Line number 1 to 36 presents an objective point of view. This objectivity is maintained by a third-person narrator, a speaker neither omniscient nor involved, but representing the world as if a part of a historical travelogue. The voice of the poem observes and reports events in a relatively detached manner, like a travel narrator. At points some concerns might be felt, but oh, that romantic schism which slanted. So this romantic schism represents that exclamation with the use of the word oh. At other points, the authorial narrator, the omniscient narrator, is eager to exemplify phenomena for the benefit of the readers. in spite of alluding to the sinister, for example, the nature of some phenomena, it does not seem to claim omniscience, neither does it claim to be directly involved in the narrative. So this is a unique narrative pattern where we have a narrator who is not present and who does not participate in the landscape, and yet the omniscience of the narrative voice is discarded. Line number 37 to 54, there is an extreme use of subjectivity. So the objective, neutral, detached, disinterested viewpoint is now replaced by a more personal, lyrical, subjective point of view. Now we have the involvement of the first person speaker that foregrounds that section of the poem that actually diffuses, dissolves, dissipates the primary imagination that is presented in lines 1 to 36. So this is a reportage of a very personal experience, starting with a damsel with a dulcimer in a vision once I saw. The use of the pronoun I is foregrounded with prominence. And this is addressed directly to the reader. The narrator in the first person narrative now claims ultimate knowledge about the dominating figure that emerges in the last part of the poem. His flashing eyes, his floating here, that image is captured by the poet in the first person narrative. Although the third person omniscience is again there, the visionary experience is captured by the omniscience narrator, yet the effect of that image on the poet is felt. And thus we have the first person narrator personalizing the experience in almost an ecstatic manner, as if responding to the world self-created by the poet himself, culminating in, I will build that dome in here. So, with this, I conclude. Coleridge himself wrote that tomorrow, 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 tomorrow I will sing a sweetest song. So, this poem, as I have just discussed, is not a fragment, as Coleridge has stated. And we must remember Lawrence, who stated that do not trust the artist, but trust the tale. So we are to trust the poem Kubla Khan, which has a preface as well as an endnote in the Crewe's manuscript, and together taking the entire poem along with the preface and the endnote, we can have a complete understanding of the poem. Nevertheless, in spite of its highly contrived structure, the readers are highly bewildered and confused. Perhaps that was the purpose of Coleridge, and it becomes the most exasperating poem almost everyone has read, almost everyone has studied, almost everyone is perhaps obliged to say something about Kubla Khan. But as I remember, a famous critic said that we know almost everything about Kubla Khan except what the poem is about. One thing is sure, the poem is a highly structured narrative on poet's experience regarding the world of Kubla Khan. The world of Kubla Khan is no longer there. The vision has faded. And Coleridge promises that tomorrow he will sing a sweetest song. Perhaps Kubla Khan, the poem, is not written. And Coleridge proposes to write a poem called Kubla Khan. Thank you very much.